Hello, listeners and viewers. Welcome to the Feelin Film podcast and our special mini series where we cover each episode of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. I'm one of your hosts, Erynne, and with me, as always, is my other co host, Erynne.
Hi, hello, and howdy.
Good morning. Good morning. This week, we are talking about episode 6, and things have finally picked up. If you were complaining about the show being slow, well, this episode is for you because this is the episode where things actually begin to happen. And I say begin to happen, obviously not in a narrative sense, because we're pretty big fans so far of the slower world building that we've gotten, but there are battles and fights, which we have not had a ton of so far in the series, and this one definitely flips the script on that. Erynne, I wanted to approach this one a little bit differently, I think, because in the past we've always just kind of gone by storyline, but for this episode, it's basically one storyline. It all takes place in the Southlands, save like one scene on the boats and one shot of some Numenorians riding across a big field on their horses, and then everything else is pretty much in the Southlands. So I figured we can kind of just take this as one big episode because it all deals with the same thing. There's no Harfoots, there's no dwarves, there's no Celebrimbor, probably to your liking. So, yeah, I don't know. This episode is action packed, full of momentum swings. I personally absolutely loved it. I had a blast overall. What was your kind of big picture takeaway from this one?
Like you said, a lot happened. Excuse me. So I guess like the biggest takeaways for me were the movement and the interconnectedness of this episode within the confines of those singular story paths. So for the most part, like the reason why we only have one storyline to follow for this episode is because it connects all of the stories and action points within the Southlands. So I thought there were some strong moments. There were some not so strong moments. I think that a lot of the show in general comes down to personal preference. And I think that it comes down to what you want from not only a Lord of the Rings style show, but a fantasy show in general. I thought that this had a little bit of something for everyone. And I thought that it was an overall strong episode from an action standpoint. From a script standpoint, I thought it was a little lacking. I thought there were some moments where it was a little cringe for me to watch, some components of character that didn't make sense to me personally. But overall, I thought it was like you said, it was a solid, packed episode full of a lot of bits and pieces that are starting to really push the story forward versus giving us a baseline to work off of.
Yeah, extremely well said. I would agree with every word that you just said. I had some sections that I kind of even rolled my eyes a little bit at, I'll be honest. But for the most part, overall, I just really appreciated the movement and the momentum and where we're headed. And I mean, it makes sense. It's an 8 episode series. Things have to happen.
Well,
So,
8 episode season.
or I'm sorry, 8 episode season. Yes. So by the season finale, just in general, knowing how storytelling works, like we've got to build to some sort of big event that is going to be a cliffhanger that is going to leave us in a place where we're curious about what's going to happen at the start of the next season. So, I
Well,
mean, it
and
makes sense.
I think there's also something to be said for the fact that it is a first season, so you had to know that at least half of the season was gonna be dedicated to baselining. I did think that it was interesting how many callbacks to the movie I felt in this in this episode there were. I felt like there were some heavier leanings on that type of fan base that might be watching is people that wanted to see calls to, Rohan or what is it? Is it the Rohirrim?
They
The
definitely look like the beginnings of the Rohirrim.
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, I thought
Um,
it was them at first. I was like, is that Numenorians or did Rohan already exist? I was a
yeah.
little bit
Yeah, I
confused in the
definitely felt
beginning.
like
Yeah.
it was a mix between the Rohirrim and the scene where Gandalf is leading them into Helm's Deep, like down that hill. So like there were moments like that I thought were really strong choices that were very intentional pulls to bringing that, like, trying to close some of those circles with giving it a beginning.
All right. Well, let's start with the opening scene as far as I wrote down in my notes. I'm assuming this was the opening scene. It was close to the beginning, and that was we started in the Southlands, and Adar is marching his orc army plus Waldreg uh, into the tower, the watchtower area.
He's just the
Because,
one lone, like, plus
I,
Waldreg.
well, I
He's
actually
the
in the
Post-it
notes
note.
I made a note and I was like his orc and human army, and then I actually rewound it and watched that like motivational speech he was giving to them, and I couldn't find any other humans. Like it is, I think it's just, I mean, there may be. Well, we know later there were humans, but in that moment, it's really just showing us Waldreg, and I
It's
just find it,
intentional, like,
it's pretty funny.
it looks very intentional now that we know how the episode, go falls through, but yeah, no,
Yes,
it's a very intentional choice filming-wise, but that scene of the actual, like, motivational speech was very interesting.
it was, and he seems to be more of a leader and really coming into that role of father of the orcs more and more. Every episode, we got more information about that in this episode later on, versus someone who is strictly just using them as battle fodder. Like it feels more like a kind of typical army might feel for a nation or a race than we've seen orcs be used in the past, right? By like Saruman and how they've been treated. So I really enjoy that little change. I'm curious to see how that continues to develop. But he marches them into the tower, which seems to be deserted. But no, it's not deserted. We have an Arondir ambush, and it's him by himself. And my first thought was, yay for tactics, because I love a good setup. They suck the orcs in. He ends up using his fancy elf agility to shoot off this some sort of device that was, or holder that was keeping the tower up, and lets the tower collapse and fall, killing most of the orcs that had come in. I just thought it was a really cool scene and part of what sets up the really engaging momentum swings back and forth, because this episode felt like at that moment the humans had won, and I was really excited. I was like, man, Bronwyn took the humans, they went off to the village, like they're all safe. Arondir is like gonna take out most of the orcs or whatever. It's just awesome. And then of course we find out later they didn't. But I really enjoyed the beginning of that, and I like getting to see more. I just like it anytime that Arondir is using his bow, frankly.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I thought that the setup was a little weak in my opinion. Like the more that I looked at it, the more that I analyzed it. I'm like, okay, from a logistical standpoint, and I understand that using that word in almost any fantasy setting is just setting myself up for failure. But like from a logistical standpoint, one, that army was massive. So like you cutting down that tower and only killing who was, or potentially like having it land on who was inside the keep at that point in time seems slightly short-sighted. Wouldn't it have been better to wait till everybody was in there and then knock the tower off the other direction and destroy the only bridge that gets them to the tower, and then nobody can get out of there? Like I look at those moments where I'm also like, okay, so we know that the tower collapsed inside and like destroyed the majority of that little like collective area, right? What we're watching though is we're only seeing a portion of the army come into that keep before he starts firing at that tower. So I'm also sitting here like, okay, how many of them would he have actually, been able to destroy in that moment? And you also
Right.
see that the tower is literally right on top of Adar. So how does he get out? Like it leaves like a really big question mark there. Like you don't see him like, grab an orc and, move them out of the way or dive. Like all you see is him just like look up at it and it's like, oh, London Bridge is falling down. And then that's it. So like I felt like that was a little too open ended. Like we obviously knew that he was going to survive because he has to, but I just felt like the setup of like the corresponding events that go with it was just a little bit on the weaker side. But I do like that they decided to, instead of run, they went back to their home. So I thought that was a really strong choice, because they were literally like, no, like, this is, we know these lands, we know where we can hide, we know where our strengths and our weaknesses are. Like, they chose to stand and fight on their terms in their territory versus this keep that, they really had no say in. Um,
Yeah.
excuse me. So
No,
I just felt like that
it's
was like, it was just a little bit weaker in my opinion. Like, I'm with you, where I love a good setup. I love, people walking into something unsuspectingly, and then all of a sudden you see how they're, trying to flip the script. I just felt like this wasn't the strongest example of that.
That's fair. That's fair. I think for me it works better on the whole because we know that he is simply delaying the army. He is trying to take out a chunk of the army. He is buying them time to get back to the homes and essentially create their own version of an ambush. So they are taking what Adar thought would be kind of a sneak attack and turning it into what they hope to be double ambushes and be lying and waiting, ready to protect their homes when the orcs ultimately come after them there. I like what you just said. Like, that's what they're familiar with. That's where they know. And if you're going to go down, go down defending your own actual home. Home and land ownership is such an important thing to the human process. It's vital, right? And so that's what means something to them. And so they're going to go down defending that. And I really appreciated that. Adar,
I know I keep looking to my right, but it's because I literally have the episode up on my phone, because I was like,
oh, I love it.
I wanted to look at that, because I remember the setup of how you see all the lanterns, or like the torches that all of his army are
Hmm.
taking in there. And I remember watching it like cascade down, but I couldn't remember which direction it was going in, because then all of a sudden, like I said, you see all of them come back. Like, and it's like, okay, so how much did we actually get rid of in that moment?
Yeah, the more when you said that, it actually clicked more than what I think I said in the beginning here. It's really not about taking out the orc army. It's about creating a diversion. It's about
Yeah.
causing chaos
Disruption.
and
Yeah.
building time for them to get away because these are really connected pieces of their plan. We also see Arondir try to destroy the hilt, which obviously he can't because it's something related to Sauron. Therefore, it's got this power to it, and so he decides we're going to hide and bury it instead, which will come into play later on. The humans, on the other hand, they get to the village with Bronwyn. I loved this section, the setup here. Like you said, call back to the movies. This is a total Helm's Deep moment here. Women and children into the buildings, bar the doors, where anybody who can fight out here with a pitchfork type
I mean, granted, it's
concept.
also like any fantasy movie. Like, it's not just Helm. Like, it's
Well, I
very
know,
called
but it's
back to that.
reality.
But yeah,
Like, what
it's
else are you going to
reality.
do?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
that's how it would go down, I think. I mean, I think that's how people would attempt for it to go down. I think, we're probably in some of the women stayed and fought,
I was gonna say, I
but
think that there were several women that did stay and fight, which I liked, because I was like, it was literally like, Bronwyn, you're telling them to do what you're not going to do. So if any woman could fight, like, why would they not want to help, defend their children and or partners? So I did like that there was like a little bit of that switch there.
I like the speech that she gives. She says the phrase new life in defiance of death, which I think is a really flowery, poetic thing, and is also something that Adar said earlier in the episode to his orcs, which I found pretty interesting. I didn't really dive much deeper into that, but it makes me wonder, like, where are these things coming from as far
I
as where is this saying coming from?
I think the really important thing that I took away from this episode is that everybody wants the same thing, and both are going through like very different paths to get it. One of them is trying to take the easy path, which is, in these stories it's always turning to, evil magic, or something along those lines. That's how you get things the easy way, whether or not they're earned or justified, versus people that are wanting to follow the light and fight for these things. So it's like you're seeing the reason, I think, that you're seeing the parallels in the inspirational speeches between the two armies is because one of them is willing to fight, the other one is just willing to run down and is like, we'll just rebuild it later. So like they're like Bronwyn's working to preserve life and then to let it regrow itself, versus Adar wants to just completely raise it to the I'm gonna raise Minas Tirith to the ground. Like literally like
Hmm.
wants to burn it all and then build something new. Now, granted, if you burn it, like the soil is significantly more fertile. So I get it from like an ecological standpoint. But from an actual like functionality of where you're seeing the duality between what they both want, it's the same thing. It's just two different paths to get to it, and which one is the quote unquote right or wrong path.
Yeah, and who it's for. I mean, that's the whole thing with what Adar's plan is. The whole concept of this episode, or is the bigger picture here, is that he is working toward creating a Mount Doom explosion so that when it erupts, it will ruin the land. He wants to ruin the land because he wants his orcs to have somewhere that they can live, because they are not able to sustain life in the same way in the way that the humans and the elves are, right? They don't want sunlight and beautiful grass. They need that kind of barren landscape to thrive. And so he is trying to create a landscape in which his people can legitimately survive better, just like humans, like you said. And they're
I feel
using
I
yeah,
feel like this episode actually like made me have empathy, which I thought was really interesting. Is
I did.
I was literally sitting there, I'm like, "Don't they deserve that?" Like, they
He
exist, nobody
says
can
that.
change the
Doesn't
fact
he
that
say that?
yeah, but that's what I'm saying is, like, he's not wrong. Like, obviously,
Yeah.
I mean, similar to Thanos, like, obviously, your methods about going it are absolutely effed up, and you should probably reevaluate some things, but the end goal of what he wants is what any people would want, is they want a home, and all he's trying to do is give them that, but he's trying to do it by destroying and or taking away the land that already exists for people.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he does. He specifically tells Galadriel when they're having their conversation after he's been captured, and he's telling us that he killed Sauron with what the heck that don't even ask me for explanation, because I don't know what that means or if it's literal.
It was, like,
But
the worst
he
lie ever. No, I think it was a pump fake. Like, it was the worst
yeah,
lie
we
ever,
can't
and
you can't
Galadriel
take
saw
him
through that, yeah.
seriously. But he
She was just
says
like, "I
to
know
her,
there's
he
a greater evil
says,
behind all of this than just you," so
yeah, she's not happy in that moment.
but
But
I
he tells
actually
her, he says,
go ahead.
about the orcs, I just want to say what he says, "As worthy as the breath of life and a home as you are," and that was the line that I think triggered that empathy from us, and clearly not that empathy from Galadriel, who responds with like rage and anger, and she clearly doesn't just want revenge. She is. I texted you and I was like, "This girl is bitter," and you were like, "The bitterest," and
She needs
she
some therapy.
she wants to cause pain. Like, she legitimately is a little bit over the line, I think, maybe at this point.
Well, and so that's what I found so interesting about that whole conversation. And that's where some things landed with me and some things didn't. Is one, like, she stops Hallbrand. She can see Hallbrand is like angry boots whenever he, pulls him to the ground and everything like that. But like, and then all of a sudden she's like, oh yeah, P.S. I want to like murder and, destroy everything that you've ever loved and blah, 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 blah. And it's like it just feels like a very big 160, 180 from like what she was just telling him, like, hey, you can't do this. We need him alive. And then all of a sudden she's about to kill him. But their whole dynamic in that moment really made me think that like maybe Sauron in body is dead, but what keeps him alive is that evil thread of what his legacy is like what he's left behind. The people, the orcs, the elves, like everything that he has touched has been touched and poisoned by his evil. And maybe that is what actually, quote unquote, brings him back. Like maybe he is in fact dead in body, but what exists is the poison of his evil that has been left behind. Like that's literally what happens with the ring, is that, Sauron is not there. Like he's not existing anymore beyond, a floating eye in the sky. But besides that, like it's the impact of what he left behind that is pervasive. That is, it's the darkness that seeps into everyone. And in that moment, like you see Galadriel literally, like you said, go from 0 to 100 in this second. And I feel like I wanted a little bit more that showed it was beyond just her anger, like that there was some form of influence there behind like what where she was like all of a sudden dipping into that, like it was hard for her to come back from. Like, you know, you have Gollum that you see over and over again give in to like the voice in his head and then go fight against it. And like we know that that is like the evilness of Sauron that's literally just poisoning him day over day. So it's like, I guess for me, like her anger going that quickly, like dialing up that quickly to the point of where like I will literally like I want to perform a genocide against these people that you claim that you have. Like it felt a little like off to me. It didn't feel warranted or earned in that moment. Like regardless of how she feels about her brother, it just didn't feel like it fit with what she had literally just stopped Halbrand from doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely opposite, like you said, and that I think that's intentional on the story's part, is to show us her stopping him, but then her almost doing the same thing herself. It is a little bit much, like you said. Like she does go 0 to 100 so fast, and it is something that she is going to need to deal with, obviously, through whatever version of Middle Earth like wartime therapy there is, because she needs to figure out what it is that she really is fighting and why. Because I think we're leading to a place where I feel like she is going to make a mistake because she's not got her wits
Absolutely.
about her.
Absolutely.
She's going to make the snap decision that is going to not be the right
You
one. It's going to
you could I
cause
mean,
some sort of loss,
you could
consequence.
almost say that what happens at the end of this episode is the mistake, is that she didn't
Well,
check
yeah,
for
she could
those
have let
things.
Halbrand kill him. She could have. You're right.
But she also
Could have.
could have checked to see whether or not that was in fact the dagger, like the hilt or whatever. Like there was a
Yeah,
gap
that
there.
even yeah, I don't even want that part just drives me crazy. That whole
Well,
thing.
but I
Oh.
mean, like there was the setup, like we saw the setup of what it happens. You just like
Mhm.
there's the gap of time that we made an assumption, which was, I mean, it's smart filmmaking or smart show making or whatever. But like it's a thing like that where like as a general, both her and Hallbrand were so blinded by their fury over this person and who they expected to place blame. They didn't think beyond the potential treachery that could be happening. And they just literally
Yep.
went with like, we won because we caught him. Cool.
Yeah. It's a good point. So, yeah, so maybe she is already suffering those consequences then, or the people that she supposedly loves and is fighting with are fighting for. We get the humans making a final stand. They do a pretty good job. They end up repelling the initial attacks, and then they discover, oh my gosh, these were the other humans that we have been fighting, not orcs. So I feel like it's a great story moment, dramatic reveal. Not the most realistic to me that you wouldn't know you were fighting an orc versus you were fighting a human. I do get that like there's chaos, but in a general sense, a little bit different body composition, typically different sounds. Like, I don't know. Anyway, doesn't really matter. The point is, they figure out, like, oh, he sent a wave of humans to fight against humans. And there's this big kind of emotional crunch that happens to them where they're like not accepting that this is what happened. It sort of, it kills their morale.
They killed their brothers.
Yeah. And it hurts. And so we see that Adar has fought their tactics with tactics of his own, which this is where I was really enjoying kind of the back and forth. I honestly didn't know where the episode was going, and I like that. I like having that feeling of, oh my gosh,
What could
I
happen
thought they were going to
next?
win. And then after that, we realize like that Numenor is coming. And so we're like, oh, well, we're going to swing back to that. And then, we get the big swing at the end. And it was like a constant pendulum.
I didn't think that Numenor was gonna make it in time. So, like, I wasn't aware of the gap of
They
time and
jumped.
travel. Yeah,
Oh,
like,
they
there was a
jumped.
very
Yeah.
big time jump there that I don't think was really well explained.
That's why
Um,
I thought it was the Rohirrim at
yeah,
first, because
that's
I
why
was like,
I was
well,
like,
Numenor
there's
is
no
barely on
way
the
that they could
boats.
have, like, made like, they were on the boats for, like, a half an hour, and we're like, "Alright, cool. We got it." We put a magic spell on it. We just, like we cut our time in half. It was great. It was a really short commute today, less traffic. But, like, I felt like there was that jump there. So for me, like, it very much pulled me out of it where I was just literally like, why are they already on land? Why are they there? Oh,
Yeah,
okay. So the horses are going. Okay. Oh, they're there. Okay. Oh, okay. So they were that close. All right. I guess the Southlands were really close to that port and I just didn't realize it.
they're not.
I
But
know they're
yes,
not.
I know what you mean. Yeah. It was a bit of a stretch, but whatever. It's fine. I
It's
like that
fantasy.
we had it. Bronwyn takes an arrow straight through her chest, like legitimately straight through her chest. This is
Eh,
probably my
chest,
biggest
shoulder.
beef.
Chest,
Shoulder.
shoulder.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
more like a shoulder. This, I get it. I get it. I get it. From a typical fantasy story, whatever, that the hero has to live. But my goodness, I just didn't buy it at all because they end up saving her. They go to great lengths to make it like bloody and kind of gross. They show like the bubbling blood and they show her getting cauterized and
I love
Theo
it.
having to do it. Yeah, I don't mind seeing all of that, but I couldn't help but like look around the room at all of the other humans that are dying. And it's one of those why only her situations that I know stories have to do to keep main characters
Oh, yeah.
alive at times
But it's
because they're
frustrating.
stand-ins, but it's frustrating because my brain was like, is Joe Bob over in the corner who's got an arrow inside of him not worthy of you paying any attention to whatsoever? Like,
But also,
come
like, you
on.
put all those leaves and everything on her, and then you're not like, "Oh, we have some extras. Do you guys wanna use
Yeah,
these on anybody else in
exactly.
this whole house?"
Exactly. Like, Theo, get moving. Like, let's go. And
I know you've
so,
only
yeah,
got
it
one leg, but limp over
just
there a little faster.
and boy did she recover too. So she's like out of it for like a half second and then the battle goes on and the next thing you see her like walking around all patched up just good to go at the
Oh,
end.
she's got a nice little
Uh
sling.
I just yeah, I just I mean, if you're going to show me a character that thoroughly speared, I mean cuz this was like it looked
It was through
cool.
and
Like
through,
from a
yeah.
it was all the like half the arrow was on one side, half was on the other. I was like, she did. There's no way. No way she's coming back from that. But she did because of romance. So we did get a romantic moment in this, and I would like to know your thoughts on the
It's
kiss
just
and
not believable. Like, I just literally don't feel anything when I see them together. Like, I can tell that they're trying. I can see that both of them as actors are trying. I just don't like I don't care to root for them. Like, and that's nothing against them. Like, I want them as individuals to, succeed and do whatever. I just don't believe the love that's behind what they're trying to do. And I don't know. I feel like part of that is because there's so much history we haven't seen between them. So a lot of everything that we're getting are stolen moments or, quick glances or, soft hand touches and stuff like that. We're not getting any, like, this is the first time where we had a full almost declaration moment. And it's just, it to me, like, without any of that history, it's hard for me to like be 100 gung ho on the Bronradier chain or whatever. So it's one of those things where I'm just like, I honestly, it sounds terrible. I just didn't feel it was necessary. Like, I feel like their storylines are super strong in and of themselves without that romantic subplot.
I'm with you 100% now, and it's unfortunate, but you cannot watch it without comparing it to Aragorn and Arwen, and we had the same thing. Like we don't get them at the beginning. We are only getting that exact same thing where we're seeing them now stealing moments. The long time afterward, they've had a romance in the past. And the difference in how you feel immediately about the longing between these two characters for each other, it's not even close. Like these two, I, yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I feel like
it's just
maybe that's
terrible.
because they have to keep it a secret versus like Aragon and Arwen, like they were far more, like, at least in the movies, they were far more open about it. Everybody that was around them knew about their history and everything like that. Whereas for Bronwyn, it's more like a scandal kind of thing. So, like, I don't know, like the soft moments between Arwen and Aragon they were also more intimate. So I think that that's also part of it, is that, like, the moments that we
Yeah,
are getting with Bronwyn and Arondir are, like,
the first.
they're still in full view of everybody else within the town and the
Mhm.
village. So, like, we had more intimate moments to connect with Aragon and Arwen, but we also had time that wasn't full of action with them. So, like, almost every moment that we've had with Bronwyn and Arondir are like in the midst of crisis versus like we had memory callbacks with Arwen and Aragon when things were simpler, when things were easier, and they were having like softer, more intimate conversations. So I feel like we're just missing some of that depth from these two in order for me to be like, yes, like you deserve the love that you're quote unquote fighting for.
Yep. I don't feel it either. I mean, that's what it boils down to me is no matter how I can intellectualize it and understand it, I don't feel it. I don't feel any spark yet, and I hope it comes because this seems to be a relationship that they're hinging that on. And if this is the only romance we're gonna get, I mean, but maybe at least I have Durin and Disa, so I can feel good about that.
We love them. But
Because we
theirs is
love
already
them,
a marriage success
but
story,
they're already
though.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I swear, though, if they do a Galadriel Hallbrand, I will lose my effing mind. I will
Yeah.
riot. I
I
will.
don't know,
No,
man.
absolutely not.
She doesn't seem cut out for relationships at this point in her life.
Well, neither
I
does
don't think.
Hallbrand, but that's never stopped Hollywood before.
That's true.
Hey,
That's
let's
true.
throw these two toxic people together and see what happens.
So
I want Elendil to have something, but I want him to have
him
something
and
with me.
Galadriel
So, like,
could
that's
stop.
different. But
Oh my goodness gracious. Well, speaking of, he is, a widow. We learned, we knew that he doesn't have a wife.
I
There's
could
a
step
lot of
in. I
secrecy.
love that his kids are fully grown. I'm fully there to be a supportive stepmother. It's fine.
There's a lot of secrecy around her death and
Yeah.
a couple of different scenes where they talk about it, and all that we hear
They
is
talk about
she
it, quote
drowned.
unquote.
Yeah. So she drowned. That's what we know. But I am curious about what the backstory for that is going to end up being, or if it is anything.
That's just it. Is like, I wonder if it's another false flag where they're like building all this intrigue around something only to have it like, nope, she literally just drowned. Or like, I found it very interesting that she drowned, but Elendil and or Isildur have no problem with being on the water. Like, there seems to be zero PTSD or any like
True.
problem with being near the water. And like Elendil was pushing for Isildur to be like a sky or a sea, whatever it is. And so I find it very interesting that both of them are super passionate and or secretive about his mom and or wife's death, but neither one of them are like, oh yeah, we have no problem with this water that we're all sailing on that actually killed her. So, but for all
Yeah.
we know, it's
I'm
going to be
with
like,
you.
oh well, she tripped and fell in a river that was like a foot deep and she drowned. It's going to be something ridiculous like that.
Yeah. I mean, it could not have anything to do of importance with the way that she died. It could just be a matter of showing us that this is a reason for why Elendil and Isildur have sort of had this distance between them that needs to be closed,
Do you
which is
think
what we
that she
see at the
died on the
end.
mainland? Because I've been thinking more and more about the creepy voice that keeps calling Isildur to the mainland, and we obviously don't know anything about his brother, but we know that
Maybe.
there's something connected between his wife's death and his brother's disappearance or wherever the heck he is, because they seem to be very, very sensitive topics whenever anybody brings them up. So I'm wondering whether or not the creepy voice that he's hearing is like not the ghost, but like the spirit of his mother and where she died, and like he wants closure, so that's what's coming from, like that's what's calling him to the mainland.
Very possibly. Yeah. I mean, I think that would make a lot of sense. And then there's also kind of the nugget at the end where Elendil and Isildur are having their nice bonding father-son
Oh
moment
yeah.
with the horses, and he specifically says, I learned about this from your mom. And so it's almost like her becoming a precursor to eventually what is going to be the Rohirrim and and Rohan being founded. We see the horse lords kind of at the infancy. We also get a little nod to Gondor's creation, which is going to be where Isildur goes, where he makes a mention of longing for, oh, look at those mountains, which is him eventually going to go up and make Gondor. So I thought that those were cool, just little foreshadowings
Yeah.
of the future.
I loved that. Sorry, I loved that. What's his name? His friend, the Otto. I call him
It's
Otto. Yeah,
Ottomo.
yeah.
Ottomo?
Atamo. And he was just like, he's like, no, I'm good. I'm gonna stay here and help them because I don't want to fight anymore. That
Oh,
was
the other guy. That's the
exhausting.
other guy.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
was like, that
Ottomo
was
is the lieutenant.
exhausting.
Yeah. Well, he almost dies.
I
And
know,
I
but so
like
did
that.
everybody else. Like, so I
I
actually
like that.
I loved his reaction where he was literally like, "No, I am not cut out for this. Like, I was cut
Yeah,
out
me
for this
too.
for sea life. I am not cut out for this." I love that that was his reaction because it's realistic.
Absolutely. 100% agree. I thought that was great as well because it was not someone just blindly being like, yeah, I'm going to go fight anyway. We're going to win no matter what. He's like, no, bro, I'm dead if I do that again. And I would like to live. So I'm
Yeah,
going to help in
hard
a different
pass.
way. Yeah. Yeah, that was great.
He's giving very
I
big
liked
Samwise energy. Like he's like a
that's
he's
yeah.
he's he's that cuddle soft cinnamon roll kind of man where he's like, I wanted to help, however, I
What
wanted
a
to help. I
description.
realize like no, like that's a common thing in writing groups. We call men that are on the softer side, but like not necessarily a love interest, but we just call them like a cinnamon roll man. They're a big softie. Like they're lovable, but for completely different ways than what the typical tall, dark, and handsome would be for like, like generally your love interest is very like sharp cheekbones, has very like dark eyes or dark hair, and is very like stark. Whereas the Samwise characters are the cinnamon rolls. They're slightly softer. There might be like of a shorter build. Like they're just not stereotypical like love interest men. So we call them cinnamon roll men. Because who doesn't love a cinnamon roll?
Fascinating.
But like this guy, like I love that it was a realistic reaction to literally almost not only losing his life, but like seeing everybody that he did care about or that he had traveled or spent all this time with facing these like massive hurdles, and he was literally like, "Yeah, not for me. I'm good."
Well, speaking of that battle, it was awesome. I mean, like we said, we got the shot of the horses being led down the valley, which was amazing looking. When they come into the town, there was this one move they used at the very beginning where two people on horses each had a hand of a chain, like a giant chain, and they just ran this chain down through like a central corridor of orcs, and it was just, oh my, those are like the kind of like fantasy battle scenes that I live for. It was a great design, would have worked, right? It made sense. I thought that was cool. It was fun seeing like this new force come in and help take it over when you thought that Adar had gotten the upper hand. Of course, they arrived just in time before they killed everybody after Theo gives Adar the hilt because
Theo.
he's effing Theo. Yeah, that's why Theo exists. So I really
Theo,
enjoyed
you're slowly
that
getting up to the
scene.
Celebrimbor like point where I like every time you're on scene, I just want to punch you in the face. Like slowly getting up to Celebrimbor level.
He really is. I guess the alternative would be let Adar kill everyone and hope he doesn't find it on his own. And I understand that would be a hard choice to
Well, and
watch your mom die,
yeah,
who you just supposedly saved, and for what you believe is probably not necessarily something that in and of itself, because what Theo knows of the hilt is that yes, it's a pretty strong magical weapon, but
he doesn't see the
that
long-reaching impact of it.
he doesn't understand the bigger picture. Yeah.
But also, how does he know where it is?
I don't know. I was upset with Arondir twice here. One, Theo shouldn't know where it is. Like
Go
he
bury it in
shouldn't
the
have
woods or something.
he shouldn't have told him. Yeah, unless he gives it to Theo to go and bury. Either way, it should never have been Theo involved in knowing where that thing is, especially with
Absolutely.
what they had to do to like get it away from him, right? And what he did with it. Like that just very poor decision making. And then the other poor decision making was when he gave it to him at the end, when he thinks he's giving it, I was pissed. I was like, are you freaking kidding me right now? Like, I get your little
He's a
nice
child.
fatherly speech. Yeah, Arondir
Kids are dumb.
is not a leader yet. Like, I just that was a poor choice. He's given him this like talk about motivational speech about guilt and loss and how he needs to throw that into the sea or whatever, and that's all
Because
well and
apparently
good.
they're much closer to the sea than we originally when we originally
Yeah, apparently so.
thought.
But like to give him the hilt as a way of like showing him that he can be forgiven. That was the most, it would have been irresponsible, even if it was actually what he thought he was giving him. And yeah, I was just not happy with that.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a problem with so many. They started moments at the end of this episode, especially, and I think they then realized during editing that they were running out of time and they needed to land the thing. Because what makes me mad is that Theo opens it and realizes that it's not what he thought, and then he doesn't do anything. Like, there's no world in which Theo would open this and realize that it's not the hilt, and then not go, Arondir, what is this? Or like like what am I supposed to do with this? And then like to me, then show Waldreg in the keep with that thing. Like you miss that connection of, oh, I've realized what this is. And then Theo was like, okay, well, I guess I'll throw this hatchet into the sea. Like, did he think that like Aaron Deer was supposed to like teaching him a lesson and was giving him a fake thing? Like there was a gap in moment there where like 2 or 3 storylines didn't connect to where the end showed for each of those pieces. And I was just like, I don't, why? Ugh.
Yep.
And then Waldreg.
Is that was my whole thing too. Well, before we talk about that end point, I
Mm.
wanted to also mention like Haldar, because we never we haven't talked about his part in all, or Haldar, Halbrand.
Oh,
We
I
haven't
was
really
like,
talked
who
about
the
his.
heck is Haldar?
You're like, is there a new
I was
character?
literally like, wait, did I literally just miss a whole new, like, I missed a storyline?
Yeah, like no, Halbrand, who we see show up, join the battle, almost kills Adar. He specifically says, "Don't you remember me?" Very intriguing dialogue. Adar's like, no, dude, am I supposed to remember you?" And Muriel ultimately recommends that he help Bronwyn in leading the people. And she looks at him, she sees the little thing, I don't know what it
Satchel
is,
emblem.
satchel emblem that clearly identifies him, and she says, "Are you the king we were promised?" And he says, "Yes." And it's a big emotional rousing moment, and I got 2 conflicting feelings on this. One is I love it. Like, okay, we're getting an Aragorn moment of the reluctant king. He's taking his position. He's going to be part of them. He's ready to lead and ready to fight. Awesome. Yes, let's go. The other part of me is super intrigued by what Adar's reaction was to him, and by that line of "Don't you remember me?" and his deep, deep rooted disdain for Adar. Now, there's 2 options I see. One is Halbrand could just have been prisoner and seen he could be just a human dude who's a king, right? And it could all be on the surface the way that it's being given to us. And he is upset about the way that Adar treated him, enslaved him and his people, and just wants revenge as a human king. But there's also this looming question of Sauron, and I am not saying I think that Halbrand is Sauron, but I think that, again, I appreciate how the show is laying seeds in a way that gives me reason to question things. Halbrand asks if Adar remembers him, and he doesn't. And he really wants to kill him. Adar specifically says in the episode that he killed Sauron. Halbrand is only recognized as a king because of that little medallion emblem thing. They see that and they go, "Oh, you have that, therefore you are this king that we were promised." No one knows him. No one recognizes him. He is just appointed as the ruler of the Southlands because he has this thing and says, "Yes." I am not convinced yet that he is not somehow either possessed by or somehow otherwise being used by Sauron, potentially, etc. I still kind of hope that he's just ends up being like one of the normal human kings and becomes like the Witch King or something. I think that'd be really cool. But I like that it's giving us a lot of different potential angles for where his character can go.
Yeah, I thought the "Do you remember me" moment was indicative of something, but I don't know what it is yet. It could very well be like what you're saying, but it could also be, Adar runs down humans every day for fun. So it's one of those things where like it could just be he's like, no, am I supposed to? Like, who the heck are you? Like, what? Okay, so sorry, I don't remember you. Like, I'll do better next time. Like, there were just these shift in power dynamics within this moment where also we have the component of we've already seen Halbrand's anger unleash itself, on the people in Numenor and stuff like that. So I find it interesting that if Hallbrand is Sauron, I do think that it would be that he's a human possessed by Sauron versus a like his I know because isn't like Sauron can like hide in plain sight and stuff like that, and he like disguises himself.
He's like ethereal still, I
Yeah,
think. I think especially with what you said about Adar killing him, the
yeah.
body of him. Yeah.
Exactly. And so for me, the way that I look at it is yes, like it could be that he's being possessed by it because we still don't know where that like burst of power happened, like where it came from whenever he was in Numenor. But I'm also like, I feel like in that moment where they're asking, like, I feel if I was the scriptwriter, I would have rewritten that last moment with Hallbrand a little differently. I would not have had him say yes. I feel like him saying yes was slightly like it was the opposite of what his character would have done like an episode ago. So I feel like everything that like the reluctant king is 100% coming across, but I almost wish that she had like maybe like seen the emblem and whispered like, "Oh, the king we were promised," and then everybody just started bowing to him regardless of whether or not he accepted the crown. Because to me, like when you just say yes, like you're like, okay, I'm not as reluctant really anymore. I'm stepping into the power that I am supposed to have. So I almost like I would have rewritten that last moment to be a little bit more impactful, like with whether he wants to or not, this is what these people need from him right now. And so I thought that Miriel's all of a sudden also acceptance of like, he's going to lead you to victory. Like, cool, you're going to stay here. Like, there are just these moments where I'm just like, does that really connect with like everything that you've set up on the previous few episodes? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like, I don't know if it's editing choices or script choices, but I felt like there were a lot of moments that felt just slightly off kilter for me based off of the character development we've had previously for several of the characters in this episode. But I felt like like there was that strong moment where then, Galadriel is about to kill Adar, but then Hallbrand stays her hand. So if that's the case, like, is that done because Hallbrand wants to be the one to kill him? And like, because he was so close to before, but he really wasn't that close to it. He was just kind of like sitting there seething with a pointed spear over him. But it was like, I felt like Galadriel was almost closer to killing him than Hallbrand was. So I don't know, like there were just some moments for me at the towards the end of this episode when it came to like character development.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I mean, like, I don't know if I think it was as much of a switch as you're saying you did, but I definitely would have enjoyed maybe a little more mystery
Yeah, I
still
just think it
to
was a
that.
shift. Like I don't know if I would say it was a
Yeah.
character switch aside from Galadriel. I don't know if I would say it was a character switch, but I do think that there was just a shift that I didn't feel had been given the proper like motivation behind it yet.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, we have him, so now he is apparently going to be a leader of some sort with Bronwyn. Well, we don't know. Like all of these decisions were made before Pompeii. So Waldreg gets given a task by Adar. He is handed the hilt, and this ties into more of like what you were talking about in recent or previous episodes, where those like little shrine like areas we see, there's a clearer reason for those existing. And I thought this was super cool because we learn that this hilt serves as a key to unlock some kind of mechanism that essentially breaks down the dam and releases the water into these underground
And who built
tunnels.
that? Who built
Yeah,
that?
don't
Like that
even
would literally
start
have
with
only been built for
that's
one purpose.
yeah, I agree. Sauron influence wise, I think the interesting thing. So visually, cinematically, emotional, like it is an awesome thing. I think the ending is so cool. It is so neat
Super
from just a
impactful.
fantasy storytelling. It's like everything has changed. Adar is scorching the Southlands, and it is becoming what we have always known it to be, which is uninhabitable. It is now ready for Sauron. The interesting thing thematically or story wise to me is that Adar is not, as far as we can tell, preparing the land for Sauron. That is going to be a consequence of what he is doing, which I find very intriguing. And it looked super cool. Just seeing like I said, Pompeii. You see like Mount Doom, this volcano we know of is like exploding. Fireballs are literally hitting and disintegrating people. It was glorious. I loved it. It's awesome. Although we get the typical hero shot of Fireball's like literally
And she's just
hitting
like,
human, and Galadriel's just in the middle of it, just standing still, like smoking, like being angry, like not even moving. That was a little dumb, but yes, you're right. From an actual realistic standpoint of, well, who would have built all of this and for what purpose? I can't think of any other reason than it had to have been built to do this thing. And how would he know that that's what would happen
that's my
unless
thing,
he
is I'm
was
like,
working for Sauron?
he had
So
to have
yeah,
been, yeah.
yeah,
There had to have been some underlying connection to where he would
collaboration.
understand because I mean, we also know that all of these orcs have been building these underground tunnels for forever. So we already know that they're like astute at burrowing like little evil moles and ferrets. But like I feel like this was indicative of a much larger scheme with why that hilt was important, and it wasn't important for any of the reasons that we were led to believe, like sticking it in your arm that creates this sword. But Waldreg just had to use the hilt to, turn this key. And if this key exists like this and it's a relic of a bygone era, like that tells me that there's likely more than one of these hilts that exists like this, which means that there's more than one purpose for these hilts, that they don't exist as just this key. Also, that would have destroyed Waldreg in that keep as well. We don't ever see that. So if Waldreg survives, I'm calling BS. But the problem that I have with every single show, movie, documentary, whatever, when the ground is rumbling, why does nobody move? It
I don't
drives
know.
me insane
I don't know.
every single time. Like,
It just stands
that
still.
you are right next to a giant freaking mountain. You know that that mountain is a volcano. You have talked about that mountain being a volcano. You feel the ground rumbling in an almost godlike fashion. And you look around like, that was interesting. Did you feel that, Herbert? Why, yes, I did, Mabel. I certainly felt something. Like, y'all are just taking this very, very casually, especially because you just got done with battle. Would you not think that the ground rumbling could have been an army running towards you on horseback or something? And y'all are just literally like, oh, good day for a picnic. Like, it just drives me insane in TV shows and movies when they do this. And then, like you said, they wait until fireballs are raining onto their camp before everybody's like, oh, inside the house. It's a fireball. You think it's not going to destroy that wood shanty that you live in? I don't.
Yeah, I get it. I don't know what they would have done differently. Like, I
Just
don't know
keep
where they would have
running.
gone.
Just keep
Yeah.
running. Like, get us. Like,
Yeah,
the whole point
I
is
mean,
get as far away as you and I live literally in a state surrounded by volcanoes. Our goal is to get to higher ground and get as far away from the coast as humanly possible.
yes.
That is the
And
escape route for
the
life.
reality is we would fail, but most likely. But the fact that they're not trying is what is frustrating.
Yes, exactly. Like,
Like,
it's not about the failure. It's the fact that you're literally just sitting there like,
yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Wow, there's a volcano.
I've accepted
Hey.
my fate. Cool. I'm going to
Yeah.
finish my sandwich.
Yeah, a little bit. Not great.
It's
But
just
it does give
it's
us-
one of those things where, like, okay, logically nobody would just be sitting there. It would be absolute
True.
chaos and true panic.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, those are the details too that I think, set apart great storytelling from really good storytelling.
Yeah.
Because you can be good and impactful and emotionally moving or riveting without those level of details can really take things up a notch without sacrificing those other things
Yeah.
that we already have experienced. And there's a couple of those examples in here in this episode where it's a little bit lacking in those. So my hope is that they learn from this, right? This is the first season. These are people, I mean, very few first seasons are perfect, and we should hope that they will be able to grow from this. But we shall see. But I overall super enjoyed the episode. Really, really stinking curious about where we're headed as far as
we only have 2 episodes left too.
Yeah. I'm not 100% sure on what kind of big event we're going to end this season on at this point. And
The forge, you think it'll start, and I'm wondering whether or not it'll end with forging of the other rings, or at least the beginning of that forge, because I don't know what other massive events could happen. Like, this to me felt almost like a mini season finale. Like, they could have very easily like pulled the other storylines forward and ended with this, and we all would have been like, okay, what the heck does this mean? So the fact that they chose this as an episode 6 leads me to believe that, like, something else big has to happen in order, or like it leading to this, because again, I understand that I can't be too logical with fantasy, but like really only Galadriel would technically be able to survive what's happening with the volcano. Every other human would be destroyed by what they're inhaling at this point. So it's one of those things where like if we see all of a sudden like Miriel and all of these other, Bronwyn and everyone, I guess Arondir could survive as well. Like none of them are genetically capable of surviving in the Southlands beyond orcs. Like that's the whole point, is that like, they're creating this habitat that very few could survive in, that are not adept to it. So I'm very interested to see where they take the next two episodes, because not many people could survive what literally just happened.
I suspect it will be Isildur and some of the
I mean, it
Numenoreans
has to be.
taking them up into the mountains to eventually become the founding of Gondor. Like, I feel like that's where we're heading, whether they get to the point of calling it that or
Yeah.
not in the next couple episodes. The forging thing to me was the natural point for the first season, but I feel like there's a lot that's kind of got to take place because we don't really even have a good idea of who might be the person, the Sauron that is going to ask Celebrimbor to commission the rings, right? Has the forge, we've only gotten one scene of those new forges in Eregion being built. Like that has been completely sidelined for like 4 episodes now. So
I mean, they take a
obviously,
while to build.
yeah, I mean, Durin and Elrond are going to get back. They're going to get the Mithril, which is going to need to get to Celebrimbor. He's going to need some of that for these purposes. Like, I don't know. I guess all of that could happen, but it's going to be, it could just be some really fast paced storytelling as
Yeah,
opposed
like it's
to
just all of a sudden this was like the crack, like the
like we
cocaine that
got the
like
character
just sets it
development.
up. Yeah.
Let's move. Yeah. So anyway, I'm
Yeah, and I
curious.
feel like the next two episodes, like the hard part is going to be the balance of storylines now, because the next two episodes are going to have to focus more on Elrond and Disa and Durin. As like you can't ignore the Harfoots either, but we've also just had a massive event happen in the Southlands, so it's going to be really interesting to see whose storyline they have to pull back on in order for them to give enough screen time to lay up the foundation for the last two episodes. So it's going to be really interesting where like what things slowly fall off, because they have to. Like you can't have like the last two episodes can't be dedicated to 4 storylines. Well, I
Yeah,
guess technically they've merged one now. So
they have. Yeah, they merged one. We don't know what's going to happen with the stranger. Something's got to be, an event has to take place with him by the end, him and the Harfoots to kind of more distinctly. And then we've got the people that are tracking him, the weird M&M elf and or character. And
yeah, and like I feel like, I mean, we only got them for like 2 seconds in the last episode. But like what I find very interesting though is also like I am interested to see how they show this eruption affecting the other components of Middle Earth, because a volcanic eruption doesn't just impact the land it's directly on. Like that's something where that ash would spread for hundreds and hundreds of miles. So I'm very interested to see how like I would be very surprised and or slightly disappointed if there wasn't at least a moment where each of the storylines that we followed, like Disa and Durin, because they're so attached to the earth, would be like, like we felt something move, or like the rock is telling me something's happening, or something along those lines. The Harfoots should be able to see that, because through all the flatlands that they travel, they'd be able to look south and see what is erupting, even if it's miles away, you can see that from that far ahead. I remember when that mountain erupted in Greenland, and like news coverage was insane because you could see it from like all over Western Europe. So I'd be very interested to see how they because they have to tie it in somehow. They can't just say like, oh, these other storylines are just completely separate. They don't, have anything to do with the eruption. Like there has to be some logical connection because they're all on the same land.
yeah, I would agree. I would
We
agree.
shall see.
That just means more dwarfs. Give me more dwarfs. Love it. Well, that's all I got for this episode. Anything we didn't touch on that you got left to talk about?
I hate Celebrimbor.
That he's not even in the episode. Why
I'm
would
just,
you add that? What?
I'm just adding it. I just
you're
want,
you're a
I just want
Galadriel.
it. I just want
You're
it
a
to be
hater,
known.
like
I just want it to
Galadriel.
be known.
That's
It's a very
this is.
punchable
You can
face.
go to therapy with her. You guys can
I
share.
am in therapy. That's the difference between me and Gladriel. I'm
Oh,
working on my issues.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you. This has been great. Erynne, where can people find you on social media if they would like to comment about this episode or find more of the stuff that you do?
You can find me at essentially Erynne pretty much everywhere. ERYNNE. You can find me online, Instagram. Hit me up.
And there's a link to essentially Erynne.com in the show notes of every episode, which will get you links to all of her other stuff as well. And you can find me on pretty much every social media channel at Erynne L. White. That's AARONELWHITE. Also on the Feelin Film official channels, and all those links are also always in all of the show notes, so we don't have to just repeat them out loud. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please share the episode, rate the podcast. We love that. Thank you. We will be back next week. See you then.